The events of September 12, 1952, in the small village of Flatwoods, West Virginia, represent far more than a simple campfire story. They mark the exact moment when the American flying saucer craze transitioned from distant lights in the sky to a visceral, face-to-face confrontation with the truly alien. This incident, involving a group of schoolboys and a local mother who encountered a 10-foot-tall entity with a spade-shaped head and a metallic skirt-like base, remains one of the most chilling and well-documented close encounters of the third kind in the history of anomalistics. What began as a routine evening of football ended in a hillside investigation that yielded physical symptoms, government scrutiny, and the birth of a lasting folkloric tradition that bridges the gap between Cold War anxiety and extraterrestrial speculation. The narrative of the Flatwoods Monster is built upon a foundation of sensory data, pungent mists, mechanical hissing, and glowing eyes that left an indelible mark on the witnesses and the quiet community of Braxton County. From the initial fiery streak across the sky to the secondary sightings of reptilian-headed beings and the shadowy intervention of men in black, this report provides an exhaustive deconstruction of the encounter, the subsequent biological trauma experienced by the witnesses, and the complex web of conspiracies that have evolved over the last 7 decades. Before we continue, I'd like to request you to subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to me. The story begins not in the darkness of a forest, but under the fading lights of a late summer evening. On September 12, 1952, at approximately 7:15 p.m., the air in Flatwoods, West Virginia, was thick with the quiet normalcy of rural life. Several young boys, Edward and Fred May, along with their friend Tommy Heyer, were playing football on the lawn of the Flatwoods Elementary School when the mundane was shattered by a celestial anomaly, a bright, fiery object described by hundreds of observers across Maryland, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia as a pulsing red fireball streaked across the sky. To the boys in the schoolyard, the object appeared to slow down and descend, eventually appearing to crash or land behind a hill on the nearby farm of G. Bailey Fisher. In the 1950s, the flying saucer phenomenon was a new and terrifying reality in the American psyche, and the boys did not hesitate to investigate. They first ran to the May home to fetch Kathleen May, a 27-year-old beautician and mother, who initially thought the object might be a downed airplane or a meteorite. Recognizing the potential danger, she recruited 17-year-old Eugene Lemon, a local member of the West Virginia National Guard who happened to be visiting, to lead the group. Lemon, armed with a single flashlight, became the de facto scout for the group of 7, which now included Neil Nunley, Ronnie Shaver, and the May boys. As the group ascended the hillside toward the reported landing site, the atmosphere underwent a localized and disturbing transformation. The witnesses began to detect a pungent, acrid odor that hung heavy in the evening air, a smell variously described as metallic burning, sulfur, or ammonia. This scent was so intense that it reportedly burned their eyes and nasal passages. The family dog, Richie, who had been ranging ahead, suddenly bolted back to the group with his tail between his legs, visibly trembling with fear. The group, though unsettled, pressed on toward the crest of the hill, where a pulsing red light beckoned through the trees. The sensory details of this approach are crucial for understanding the spicy theories that would later emerge. This was not a standard meteor landing. Meteors do not typically produce thick, persistent mists or localized odors that induce immediate physical distress. Upon reaching the summit, they saw it, a glowing, pulsing ball of fire resting on the ground, or perhaps hovering just above it. But it was what stood to the left of the light that would haunt the witnesses for the rest of their lives. The moment of contact was instantaneous and terrifying. Eugene Lemon, leading the party, noticed 2 bright, greenish-orange lights peering from the shadows beneath a massive oak tree. Thinking he had spotted the eyes of a raccoon or an opossum, he swung the beam of his flashlight toward the tree. The light did not reveal a common animal, but rather a towering, inhuman entity estimated to be at least 10 feet tall. The creature's anatomy was unlike anything described in contemporary UFO reports of the little green men variety. Its head was shaped like the ace of spades, coming to a sharp point at the top, which some witnesses interpreted as a dark, pointed hood. Within this hood was a perfectly round, blood-red face. The most arresting features were the eyes, which emitted a greenish-orange glow and were described by some as resembling portholes through which light was being projected. The entity's body was dark, possibly black or a deep, iridescent green, and appeared to be encased in a metallic dress or a dark pleated skirt-like garment. accounts of the creature's appendages varied, adding a layer of mystery and spiciness to the investigation. Some witnesses saw small, claw-like hands extending from spindly arms, while others claimed the figure possessed no visible arms at all, appearing more like a mechanical pillar than a biological being. As the flashlight hit the entity, it didn't just stand there, it reacted. The creature reportedly made a shrill hissing sound, which Kathleen May famously described as being like bacon frying. Then, it began to move. It did not walk. It glided or hovered off the ground, moving directly toward the group. The speed and fluid motion of the entity triggered a primal panic. Eugene Lemon screamed and dropped the flashlight, plunging the hillside back into darkness. The group turned and fled back down the hill, later recounting that they felt as though they were being pursued through the pungent mist by a force they could not comprehend. The terror did not end once the witnesses reached the safety of the May home. The physical toll of the encounter was immediate and documented. Several members of the party began to suffer from severe nausea, vomiting, and throat irritation that lasted for days. Kathleen May and Eugene Lemon were particularly affected. Reports indicate that their throats were so swollen they could barely swallow, and their eyes remained red and irritated. While skeptics have long argued these symptoms were the result of mass hysteria or the sheer exhaustion of running down a hill in a panic, many researchers point to the pungent mist as a chemical irritant. In a particularly spicy twist, some local residents and later researchers compared these symptoms to exposure to mustard gas or other industrial chemical agents. The oily substance found on Mrs. May's clothing and the report of a viscous gummy deposit on the ground suggested that the entity had either inked like a startled cephalopod or was leaking fluids from a damaged mechanical system. The most tragic piece of evidence was the family dog, Richie. The dog, who had encountered the creature first and fled, was found dead the next morning, reportedly surrounded by his own vomit, suggesting he had succumbed to the toxic effects of the mist. The following day, local authorities and journalists flocked to the Fisher farm. A. Lee Stewart Jr. of the Braxton Democrat discovered skid marks in the grass and a rubbery substance that did not appear to match any local material. Sheriff Carr and his deputies also noted the lingering, sickening, burnt metallic odor that still clung to the oak tree where the entity had stood. The investigation by the U.S. Air Force, conducted under the auspices of what would become Project Blue Book, was dismissive. They concluded that the bright light was a meteor, which it likely was, and that the monster was simply a barn owl perched in a tree. According to this theory, the owl's heart-shaped face appeared red due to the reflection of red aircraft beacons in the area, and its talons looked like claws gripping a branch. However, the witnesses, particularly the adults Kathleen May and Eugene Lemon, remained adamant that they knew the difference between a bird and a 10-foot-tall metallic entity that hissed like frying bacon. The Flatwoods encounter was the match that lit the fire of one of ufology's most enduring and spicy tropes, the Men in Black, MIB. Shortly after the incident, Gray Barker, a local Braxton County native and aspiring writer, began investigating the sighting. Barker conducted extensive interviews with the witnesses and published his findings in Fate magazine, but it was his 1956 book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, that changed everything. Barker connected the Flatwoods case to Albert K. Bender, a researcher who claimed to have been visited by 3 mysterious men in dark suits who warned him to stop his UFO research. These MIB were described as having exotic features, driving black Cadillacs, and emitting a cold, threatening aura. While Barker was later revealed to be something of a master hoaxer who may have embellished these accounts for financial gain, he successfully introduced the idea that the government was actively silencing witnesses of high-profile cases like Flatwoods. But the conspiracy goes deeper than just mysterious men in suits. Researcher Frank Fascino Jr. has spent decades arguing that the Flatwoods Monster was not a cryptid at all, but a pilot in a sophisticated armored suit that had been forced to ground during an ongoing air war between the U.S. military and extraterrestrial craft. According to Fascino, the summer of 1952 saw a record number of UFO sightings, including a massive wave over Washington, D.C., and the military had shoot-down orders in effect. Fascino's research suggests that the fireball seen by the Flatwoods boys was actually a damaged craft, and that the entity they encountered was an occupant waiting for a rescue or repair. He points to the disappearance of a USAF jet that same night, and the presence of plainclothes investigators at the Fisher farm as evidence that the military knew exactly what had landed on that hill. This theory paints the Flatwoods Monster not as a predator, but as a victim of a clandestine aerial conflict that the public was never meant to know about. As if a 10-foot-tall spadehead wasn't enough, the Flatwoods saga includes even stranger, spicier reports that suggest the entity was part of a broader presence. On September 13, 1952, the very next day, George and Edith Snitowski were driving through Braxton County with their infant son when their car died inexplicably. They were soon overwhelmed by a foul, sulfurous smell and a bright light that illuminated a 10-foot-tall creature standing in front of their vehicle. This encounter added a terrifying new detail. The monster was not wearing its spade-shaped hood. Instead, the Snitowskis described a reptilian and bony head and lizard-like hands that the creature dragged across the hood of their car before vanishing into the woods. As soon as the entity was gone, the car mysteriously restarted. This secondary sighting led many to speculate that the monster was actually a biological entity encased in a mechanical exoskeleton or spacesuit, and the Snitowskis had seen what was inside. Another sighting by Mrs. Audra Harper in the nearby town of Heaters occurred just days before the Fisher Farm incident. She and a friend saw a ball of fire on a hill, followed by the appearance of a tall, dark silhouette of a man-shaped figure. These clustered sightings suggest that Braxton County was being surveyed, or that multiple craft had entered the area simultaneously. Today, the Flatwoods Monster has transitioned from a source of terror to a beloved icon of West Virginia folklore. The town of Flatwoods and the nearby city of Sutton have fully embraced their Braxy. The Braxton County Monster Museum attracts visitors from around the world, showcasing original sketches, eyewitness accounts, and memorabilia that keep the 1952 mystery alive. 5 massive monster chairs are scattered throughout the county, inviting tourists to sit where the boys once ran in fear. The legacy of the Flatwoods Monster persists because it taps into a fundamental human fear, the realization that we are not alone and that the things out there are truly beyond our comprehension. Whether it was an owl, a secret military experiment gone wrong, or a damaged visitor from another world, the Flatwoods Monster remains a chilling testament to the night the unknown came to West Virginia and decided to stay.